All right, so we're recording now. So I want to, first of all, thank my guest that's going to be on in a few seconds. I'm going to introduce him, but I just wanted to give the listeners and the viewers a quick rundown of why it's taking so long for my last podcast. So for me, I'm really intentional about having motivational and inspirational individuals on my podcast. So it's taken me a long time to be able to get quality individuals on. So for today, I'm starting my new podcast with the name Officially Unfazed, with an individual that I have from afar been watching him for a long time. We went to Cal together, played football for a quick year. And then from there, just kind of watched him blossom into a Pro Bowl running back, successful entrepreneur, dad, and just inspirational Black figure. And so with all that said, I want to welcome you, Justin Forsett, to being on the Officially Unfazed podcast this morning.
Man, I appreciate it, man. I'm honored to be on the show, and as you change the name of the title of the podcast to be a guest, man. So, thank you.
No problem. So for me, I want to just give a quick rundown of why it was so important to have you, Justin, on, and the listeners and viewers. So when I have people on my podcast, I try to start with the foundation of everybody should know, for the most part, that I have a clothing line called Unfazed. But for me, it's more than a clothing line. It's a lifestyle. It's a mentality that I think everybody should have. And I think that I can talk till I'm blue in the face about what unfazed means. But for me, I want to have people on that are notable figures, people who are well known, to give people that may look like you or come from where you come from the motivation and the inspiration that they can possibly get to where you're at in terms of your success and what you've been through, because they look like you. It's hard for me to have someone resonate. Obviously, you and I are African Americans, but I want to have people from all backgrounds on, so that people that look like them or come from where an individual comes from, it resonates more by hearing someone's story of what it took to get to that point. A lot of times we see people who are successful, but we don't necessarily know what the journey took to get to that point. And I think focusing on the obstacles or what it took to overcome is something that we need to focus on more in our society, rather than just seeing someone get to a certain level and not know what it took. So having you on, Justin, is super important. Thankful for you for being on. Before we got on, we know the devil was working a little bit, but we know that God has something bigger in store for what we're about to be talking about today. So I'm just going to give a couple of accomplishments of what I've done in terms of my homework of your personal life.
Okay.
And then we'll get into who you are and what led us up to this point. So for me, we played at Cal. I did a little bit of homework. I don't know if you know this, but you probably may know this, but you're a third-time all-time leading rusher at Cal. We've had a lot of great running backs that went through the Cal football program. You're behind Muncie and behind Marshawn Lynch, which everybody should know who Marshawn Lynch. I don't know if you know this, but you were 10 yards away from being in second place all time behind Marshawn. So Marshawn only had 10 more yards than you, and you're only 148 yards away from being the all-time leading rusher at Cal. So I don't know if that stuck, if you knew that while you were playing, but that is pretty much one game for you that would have put you as an all-time leading rusher. But I think your story of how you ended up at Cal, which we'll get to in a little bit, is more intriguing than where you fell in the all-time leading rusher in yards. 7th round draft pick of Seattle Seahawks, 2014 Pro Bowl, averaged 4.7 yards throughout your career. That's third, tied with third with a bunch of individuals, but third all time behind Barry Sanders and Jim Brown with your yards per average. Barry Sanders was 5.0 yards and Jim Brown was 5.2. We know if you'd have got the ball more, you probably would be up there in your overall yards over your career. But Tell me if I'm wrong with this information. 9-year career,
Yep, 9 year. Yep.
9-year career, co-founder of a multi-million-dollar business. Your product is in all Targets and Walmart. Co-host of a podcast called Founders Church, which I love the name of it. I personally think that the podcast was made for me. I get into it every single time you guys interview somebody and what you guys talk about. Also a husband, father, and a coach. So those are the things that came to mind that was important for me to stress to the listeners. And that is why I wanted you to have you on. You have a lot of things that you've done over your course of your career, and you're going to continue to do things. But with all that said, welcome again, Justin. So I want to talk about, first of all, where you grew up, and what led you into football.
Yeah, one, thank you for the great introduction. And some of that stuff I didn't even know. Like I knew I was third all time, but I didn't know how far I was
In
away from,
yards.
from number two and number one. So that's pretty cool. Um, no, man, I came from very humble beginnings. A small town, 3,000 people, little town called Mulberry in Florida, Central Florida. And yeah, not a lot of people make it out to accomplish their dreams and goals and aspirations in life. And just like a lot of young black kids growing up, I use sports as like a vehicle as my way out. Like I was a way to, as into wealth and financial freedom, Lord, for my family because we came from such humble beginnings. So, you know, I remember those times when I had to take baths with bottled waters. I remember those times when I had to do my homework by candlelight because the power, we couldn't pay the power bill and lights were out. And, even being homeless, living out of a motel with me and my two brothers, my parents, living out of a motel at the edge of town. So all those moments kind of really pushed me to want to be more and do more for my family and promise myself that I wasn't going to allow my kids to deal with the same things that I dealt with growing up and just give them a better opportunity in life. So that's kind of what pushed me. And then I saw a guy named Barry Sanders one day running the rock on Sundays with the Detroit Lions, and he was not the biggest guy on the field, but the most electrifying man on the field whenever he plays. So I was like, man, that's got to be the sport for me, and I was pretty good at it.
Man, so you gave me some gems already of why it was important to have you on. Like, I don't know if you had an opportunity with all the interviews. I know you've done some big interviews so far, but I don't know what the interviews you've done so far that you've had the opportunity to talk about being homeless, and doing your homework by having a candlelight in order for you to see, taking those baths with bottled water. Like, that is what this podcast is about. Like, people don't get to hear those stories that often. We talk about, hey, what have you done with Hustle Clean, and what stores are you in, and what did you do as a football player? And I think people need to hear where you've come from. We don't get to hear that all the time. So that's a gem which is confirmation why I wanted you on to talk about your struggle, because I know it wasn't easy. I didn't know what it was. All I knew was the information that was put in front of me in terms of Google and just knowing you a little bit playing at Cal. So, man, that's pretty deep. Also, once you started playing football, at what point did you transfer to come to Texas? Because I know at some point, I think you were born in Lakeland.
I was born in Lakeland. Yeah. Born in Lakeland, grew up in Mulberry. Yep.
Okay. I don't know if you remember, but Johnny Mack and I played. And so every time I hear Lakeland, Johnny Mack always comes to mind.
Legend.
Yeah, yes, definitely a legend. Junior college level and high school level. So for me, what I wanted to know, when you transferred from Florida to Texas, and what was it like when you moved from Florida to Texas? One, in terms of how your living situation was, and then two, football wise.
Yeah, so I transferred my junior year of high school, so I had 2 years left, and we picked up and moved to Texas, Arlington, Texas. And when living wise, we got there. We were staying in like a Studio Six hotel motel when we got there for the first couple of weeks, and then stayed with some friends um, that we knew out there. And eventually got into an apartment where when we moved. One of my childhood friends, he moved with me, and we went out there to play and finish up our schooling for the last 2 years. and it was different, man. It was because I'm coming from Florida, Central Florida, that in the country, not like Miami or anything like that.
Mm, mm.
And well, we don't have a lot of access to a lot of different things. But football, sports is like everything. But when you move to Texas, like football is everything. Like right, it
Yeah.
is not like the atmosphere, towns closing down, and the guys are just. I mean, from my experience, they were just a lot bigger than what we were facing. Like I don't know, wouldn't say more talented, but they're just like the size factor was different in Texas, and those same things. I was too small and too short to be in Florida running back, and even more so in Texas when I landed. So it was like again odds stacked against me, but I was determined to be the exception and not the rule, and make way for myself and get one step closer to my dream, and that was to, get in the NFL. But I had to do well in high school, which I did. I had back-to-back state championships those 2 years in Texas. I had some good stats, but no colleges were running to offer me any scholarships, so it was an uphill battle there.
Man, so you kind of gave me an alley oop into my next question, but before I get into that, obviously we both played football, and I'm from California. You grew up in Florida. You played in Florida for a little bit, and you moved to Texas. There's
Yep.
always this debate about which state is better,
Oh yeah.
and how does your California, Florida, and Texas compare to each other football wise. Uh, you cannot change my mind about what football was like or who was better between California, Florida, and Texas. But when I got to Texas, I understood that football was totally different than
Yeah.
anything I've ever seen. And living in Texas for 13 years, the same area where you went to high school, I was able to witness that football is almost pretty much like a religion out there.
Yep.
If you don't play football, you kind of looked at like what's wrong with you, but it is on a different level out there. I think you said it's not necessarily about the talent. I think more than anything, it's they're more prepared for the next level in terms
Yep.
of having the equipment, their structure, and just taking it more serious. The
For
kids
sure.
start from 4 or 5 years old playing football where the helmets are too big for the kids, and it's serious from that age on.
Yep.
So that leads me into my next question, which you kind of led into. Because you had the stats and you probably felt like you should have gotten a lot of more scholarships, what was
Hmm.
your mindset like? And what do you think helped you continue to believe in yourself, to keep pushing and keep believing in yourself that you could play at the level that you ended up at going to Cal?
Man, what made me keep going? It's a great question because I battle between two different answers. Right, I was chasing a dream,
Mhm.
no doubt that I wanted a better life for myself and for my family, but I was also running from a nightmare. So I felt like the what we went through at times for me personally, it just felt um, like it created a chip on my shoulder, and it felt like something like we didn't deserve to have to go through. Like nobody deserved to have to go through certain things, right? I just desire to want more for myself. So, I wasn't willing to give up or cower um or to ever quit because those things were pushing me. Like when I
Mhm.
was running in 100-degree heat, and I was and I wanted to give up, and I was running sprints by myself. I was thinking about room 108, which was the room number in which we stayed in that motel at the edge of town. We didn't have a house, and I would think about those homework or book reports I had to do on the candle, like, and those times I had to take bath with those Zephyr Hill water bottles. Like those things like really pushed me. So I just knew, one, that I couldn't go. I didn't want to live like that, and I want my future to look like that. But also, I had just trust and faith in God. Like He was going to open up a door if I did my part. Like doors will open. Like because I just had extreme faith and belief. So
Mm. Deep. I can feel that. I know it's not always easy, but I think that if things are meant to be, it's meant to be. And I think in order for you to get to where you want, You had to be intentional, which is the slogan
Yeah.
for Unfazed. You have to really think about what it is that you want and what it's going to take to get to that point. And I think um, we always do things that we want to do that can help us in the long run, but it takes that consistent effort and putting in the work to prepare you. So when that time comes, you get the opportunity that's presented to you, and you take advantage of it, which you did. Talk to me about when you were recruiting or lack of recruiting coming out of high school, and the situations that happened to you, specifically with Notre Dame. All I
Mhm.
remember at Cal was when you got there, there was something that happened with Notre Dame, and last minute you ended up coming to Cal. And walk me through what your thoughts were when you got to Cal after everything was said and done.
Yeah, no, I was offered a scholarship to Notre Dame after my All-Star game, my senior year. And essentially, long story short, that week before signing day, they told me they didn't need me anymore. So had to start. I wasn't highly recruited, and I already had I had an offer at UConn earlier, in which they reneged on the offer and they took theirs back, and then I had an offer at Notre Dame, and then they took it back a week before signing day. So I was crushed, like a 17-year-old
Mm-hmm.
kid. I remember going out into my basement where I lived at the time, in my room, and just crying my eyes out because I'm like, God, like what's going on? Like I'm doing
Mm-hmm.
everything that I'm supposed to do, and like my 17-year-old mind couldn't wrap my head around like how are these things keep how do these like negative things or these hurdles keep popping up on me right out of
Mm-hmm.
nowhere, like especially this close to signing day. Didn't know what I was going to do, and I remember, and during that time was a pivotal point for me in my life because I remember going in that basement, crying my eyes out, and praying because that was the only thing I knew how to do. Like, right.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, I've been faith driven for a very long time. And I remember on my knees as I was crying in that basement, I said, God, I pleaded and I was like frustrated and upset. And I said, God, you got to show me something. Like, I can't keep doing and putting in the work and not seeing any of the results or seeing my friends benefit from things from the work that they're putting in, but I'm not receiving it.
Mm-hmm.
And I literally opened up my Bible at the time and I just flipped it open. I said, God, you got to show me something. Like, and it landed like no kidding on like Proverbs 3, and I started reading Proverbs 3. And as soon as I got into the beginning of that chapter, it was saying like, trust in the Lord God with all your heart, lean not on your own understanding, acknowledge Him in all your ways, and He'll direct your path. And as I was reading that text in that passage, I could feel like a warm sensation like coming over my body. Like it was feeling like it felt like I don't know, a peace that surpassed like all understanding. It was like a warmth that like God was signaling to me, and I felt like that was I first in real true encounter with just like His presence. That it just comforted me during that time. It was like, okay, I'm gonna be all right. I didn't know nothing in my situation had changed, right? I was still without a scholarship within that, during that time. But internally, there was something that happened that God gave me a comfort and just an acknowledgement, like things are going to be okay. And I
Mm-hmm.
can't explain it, right? It sounds weird to, to voice that sometimes, but it was in that moment where I was like, man, I just have to excel at what I can control. Like, let God be God and do what He does. And if it
Right.
sees fit to open up a door for me in college, which I believed He would, that then so be it. But I knew my future was in His hands, and they're in good hands if that's the case. So I just kept working, and then
Mm-hmm.
a few months down the road, where we were still sending out tapes and highlights to the West Coast teams and conferences, uh, Cal got back to us, and we started kicking off conversation, and
Was that after signing day?
way after that was May. So I didn't.
Okay.
I mean, I didn't hear from Cal until
Okay.
when it's spring. Spring is like May, I want to say.
Mm-hmm.
So there's months like in between, like people are just telling me, Justin is maybe going to junior college or gray
Mm-hmm.
shirt somewhere. Abilene Christian told me I could walk on. Like I was like,
Mm.
all these other schools is like just like come on. Our South Carolina State. I was a before I signed. A lot of people don't know. They talk about Notre Dame, but I was gonna go if Cal didn't offer me the scholarship when I got there, um, then I was gonna go to South Carolina State,
Mm.
which is a historical black college.
Right.
Down in South Carolina. But yeah,
Okay. Man, so we kind of have similar situations, but I'm not going to get into my situation in terms of how I ended up at Cal. But that's pretty heartbreaking, to be a 17-year-old to be expecting that you're going to get a scholarship to a a pretty big program like Notre Dame. Notre Dame is one of the top football schools of
Yeah.
all time, and to know a week before signing day they take back that scholarship is something that could really crush an individual. And I think a lot of kids today have issues with having that mindset to where if something doesn't go wrong, that's when they start to crumble and they get anxiety and they get depression and they want to do the extreme. But I think having your faith and being strong-minded led you to keep pushing and just understand that there was a bigger purpose and that God does things for certain reasons. And I think looking back at it, from my personal perspective, I think Cal ended up being the way that you should have went.
Yeah,
Who
yeah,
knows?
yeah.
Like Notre
Wholeheartedly.
Dame, let's keep it real. Notre Dame has a lot more talent that comes there in terms of 4 and 5 star players. You don't know if you would ever got an opportunity, but you ended up going to Cal and you took advantage of the opportunity that was presented to you, even though we had some great backs there
Yes,
too.
yeah, yeah.
So that's awesome that you didn't quit. You just you prayed and things worked out the way that this were supposed to be. So once you get to Cal, um, tell me if I'm wrong. First game, you made an impact immediately as a true freshman. Air
Mhm.
Force, I think it
Air
was
Force
Air
game. Yeah,
Force.
yeah, yeah,
You
yeah.
you scored a touchdown. Uh, did you
The
score a touchdown?
the first game, I believe I did. Yeah, and I scored in number one.
Okay.
Um, it was a rushing touchdown. Yep, I remember.
So just doing the homework, as I said, I saw in there that you scored a touchdown, which is a pretty big feat in itself. Like you cannot score a touchdown the rest of the year, and to go from what you went through of not getting recruited, coming to Cal, pretty much last minute, not redshirting. Usually, when you don't redshirt, that means that you have talent. They see something in you, and they want you to play and get some experience in some way, shape, or form. So to do that, and then not only that, you ended up playing and got a touchdown is a big feat in itself. But just talk to me from your time at Cal. I saw that you had 49 total yards as a true freshman.
Yeah,
Your
yeah,
sophomore year, you had 999 yards, which
yep.
is an extreme jump. Your junior year, you had 626 yards. So you go back a little bit. I don't know what happened. We're gonna get into that. And then your final season, you had 1,546 yards.
Yep.
So talk to me about your time at Cal as a running back, playing behind or with J.J. Arrington, who had 2,000 yards,
Yep.
and Marshawn Lynch, who everybody should know who that is. I'm not going to get into that in detail.
Mhm.
But just talk to me of how you started as a true freshman, going out through your senior year, ended up with 1,546 yards. But in between that time, it didn't statistically look like you were going to have that trajectory that you had from your sophomore year. But somehow you came back in the end and your senior year ended up getting a lot of yards that helped you get drafted.
Yeah, no. For me, it was all about making room, man. I didn't care who was in the room with me as far as like running back and who I was competing against. Like
Mm-hmm.
I felt like I remember even to this day my feeling on that sideline at the Air Force game uh, when I'm getting ready to go into the game and I'm upset, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm boiling over there on the side because I'm thinking I'm gonna play. Like I'm thinking, I'm like I'll have some real carries. Like my mindset was to come in and have a true impact. Like
Yeah.
at that game, I was even looking at Teffer looking at me crazy because Coach Teffer at the time and Coach Gould asked me
Mm-hmm.
what's wrong. Like I expected to be out there on the field. Like not, and I was playing special teams, but I
Yeah.
wanted to get carries on the
Right.
field. So I felt like I did enough in camp to make that. And, JJ Arrington was a Doak Walker candidate, and Marshawn Lynch is the number two running back, I believe, that came out our year behind Adrian
Mm-hmm.
Peterson.
Mm-hmm.
So I just believed that I belonged, right? And
Right.
so just settling into my role finally, and and just like letting things come to me and learning as I continue to progress, like how looking at the competition around me and say, okay, what can from their game can I take to my and add it to my game? Like not wasting time worrying or doubting or being frustrated and disappointed at my playing time. So trying to make the most of it. So hey, making that big leap from 40 yards that you said my freshman year to senior to sophomore year, 999, and then that next year, well, then we changed coordinators that year. And then I mean I was playing with Marshawn, so he was getting the bulk of the
Right.
carries, especially that was his last year when he left early. And then I was the starting running back my senior year. So that was that jump on like, okay, I got more
Hmm.
time, more opportunities. So production was up. And I was one step closer to my dream. But it was a beautiful experience at Cal. Met my wife there.
Hmm.
Made some lifelong friends and brothers on campus. And yeah, it was just me finding my way and finding like at least how to view competition. Cal taught me how to view competition, not only just in
Hmm.
on the sports side of things, but in life.
Hmm.
You just can't allow uh, opposition or even competition to cause you like to sulk. Like
Right.
it does nothing. Like you got to find ways when you're competing against another person or another brand. Like how can you use their momentum for your good? Like how
Right.
can you use their gifts and add it to your game? So that's kind of how I looked at it, and that it taught me a lot there. Just going up with a lot of good, great backs and athletes.
Cool. So I like to call that being unfazed, but what
Yes, sir. This is
you,
unfazed for sure.
you definitely had an unfazed mindset. So I love your story just because I know what it took and what you had to go through to get to Cal one, and then when you got to Cal, you came in with some beasts in terms of the running back room, as we just talked about. But you still came out on top. 1,546 yards is a lot of yards. I don't care if you're playing flag football. That's a lot of yards,
Yeah,
and to do that in, I think it was the Pac-10 back then.
yeah, it was.
Okay, so it was that in itself shows that there was talent that you were playing against. So you get drafted, seventh round, Seattle Seahawks, and then you get cut several times.
Yeah,
That you got cut by the Seattle Seahawks, and then I think Indianapolis signed you, and then you went back to Seattle
yep.
that same year. Was Marshawn there the year that you got drafted?
No, no, he was in Buffalo.
Okay. So just talk to
Okay.
me in general about being cut several times and then ended up becoming a Pro Bowl running back. What is your mindset going from city to city? I'm not sure if your wife was traveling with you or how that works.
Mhm.
Talk to me about what was going on at that time in your mind.
Man, it was just for me it was difficult and challenging, I would say, because you bounce around and you're not never in a spot too long. Now, I ended up being with Seattle 4 years and Baltimore for three throughout the course of my career. But I was, some other teams I bounced around with, and I was cut, fired 6 times throughout my career.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a lot. But for me, going around, my mindset was like every year I was going to be a Pro Bowl running back. Like
Mm-hmm.
before it even happened,
Right.
before it actually came to fruition in year 7, right? My mindset was the worst thing that a coach could do was give me an opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
So I was going to be the most prepared. I was going to be smart. I was going to be accountable, trustworthy. I was going to make people better around me. I may not be the fastest. I may not be the strongest or the biggest, but what I can do, nobody else is going to be able to do better, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that was my mindset, and each locker room gave me new opportunities, um, new relationships to kind of grow as a man and as a player. So I was just taking every opportunity and trying to maximize it as much as I could. And finally, 7 years down the road, I get a chance to be thrust into the lineup and start and be the franchise guy. And it was a blessing, to answer to a lot of prayers.
Because I'm living through you right now. When you
Uh-huh.
finally get the opportunity to start for the Baltimore Ravens and you kill it and you get to go to the Pro Bowl, how do you get notified? Do you get a call? Do you get like a coach tells you? How do you get notified that you made it to the Pro Bowl?
Yeah, it's a call, right? We knew we had a good shot, just because I was number 5 rushing in the league.
Hmm.
So it's taking 6 guys, but I was up against guys. It was like the top 6 guys were already like perennial Pro Bowl running backs. So I was up against the LaShawn McCoys, Adrian Petersons, the Arian Fosters at the time that were just like you get their names alone get them in. So, but yeah, I got that call that I was going to be in, and man, it was because that was one of the things as a kid. I watched the Pro Bowl, people going to Hawaii, and
Hmm.
I never felt like throughout my career up until that point that I was really had true validation from my peers and
Hmm.
from the league that I was in, and that was special, man. I even talking about it, even from the college that we just talked about, and some of the stats, and me coming from high school, not supposed to be there, in
Right.
college, and then into the pros and going to the Pro Bowl after not supposed to be there by traditional standards. It just shows me just how that's like faithful like God is like in just in my life. Like you have this one notion of how things are going to play out, but I mean I wouldn't change it. So like
Right.
whatever like happens in life now, I can always go back and say, man, like all of this is for my good. Like I can use this for my
Everything
advantage.
everything prepared you for that moment, like all the stuff that
Right.
you've been through. I think it made it that much more gratifying to know what you went through to get to that point. That's what
Yeah.
people don't understand, or people don't get a chance to hear too often, which is why it's so important to have you on and talk about that story, because it's somebody that's going to be listening, that's going to hear your story, that came from where you came from, or looks like what you look like, or the same height as you, that you're going to give them that opportunity to say, you know what, I just heard the same story from somebody that comes from where I come from, or looks like me, that gives me that extra push that it is possible.
Yeah.
And so that's what I love about your story.
I could go back to as I'm thinking about it now during that season because I was like on a trajectory like middle of the season knowing like okay things are really clicking here and I got opportunity and I'm at one point in the season I was like I think as high as like number 2 rusher
Hmm.
in the NFL and or even leading rusher at times and I can remember in the Charlotte, the Carolina Panther game. I was a home game in Baltimore, and I'm almost breaking down on the sideline, like crying. The game was going on. We went in. It was a big like Steve Smith was my teammate, so it was a big game
Hmm.
for him. And I'm
Yeah.
doing well as in the game too. And I'm on the sideline, just like just amazed of just like the steps in order that it took
Are
for
you are
me
you are you playing it back in your mind, everything that went through your whole life to get to that point while you're at the
every
game?
everything in the game, like it just hit me as I'm looking up at Mona Sala, I'm looking up at the scoreboard, and I'm looking up at the fans, and people cheering for me, and I think maybe I just scored a touchdown. I just scored a touchdown. I'm thinking like in the south end zone, and and it's just like man, it's so much sweeter like I than I could ever imagine like to be in
Hmm.
that moment and be in have the opportunity. So, I just say that to encourage people like, I always say that everybody wants a breakthrough, but nobody wants to be broken. But
Hmm.
it's in those series of brokenness that prepare us for our opportunity to shine when it comes. So just got to take advantage of it and seize it.
Preach, preach. I like to say there's no testimony without a test.
Yeah.
And you've been tested many times. So I know
Still.
we're strapped for time, and I want to respect your time. So I'm going to kind of cut some of the
Yeah.
questions that I had out, but I do want to talk about your company, Hustle Clean,
Hmm.
and your Shark Tank disappointment,
Yep.
because I literally watch Shark Tank every Friday. I saw y'all on there. I was hyped to see y'all on there, but I think things happened the way that they were supposed to be. So can you just talk to me real quickly what it was like, and how you guys bounced back from what happened on Shark Tank?
Yeah, I mean, after sharing all of my story now, you and all the listeners can see that I'm no stranger to rejection or
Right,
setbacks. So that part was no different, man. And I
right.
mean, that was very disappointing. Like that was a good word to use, a description to use for how I felt during that time. Maybe the most disappointed I felt like in my adulthood, leaving that like before it even aired, like before after taping, just knowing
Right.
what we had just encountered, but it was the best thing that happened to us internally and even externally in the business to be on there,
I
have a
agree.
platform to share the brand to 7 million people.
Right.
And then also internally to make sure that we were crossing the T's, dotting the I's on everything just like operationally and as far as the roles and things like that. It just made us stronger and smarter as a group. So I wouldn't take it back. Like I want to go back, and my thing was like I'm gonna go back now at some point, and I want to be a judge on Shark Tank.
Hmm.
Um,
It's
and
possible.
Yeah, no, that's the goal and the mindset. So, but it was a beautiful experience for us, like I said, both internally and externally, and it really pushed us forward, the brand and the company forward. Because from there we went on to Good Morning America, we went on to View, and then we went into Target, national distribution, and been in there for over 4 years now. So we've been blessed
Amazing.
because of.
Amazing. So that motivates me all the time that you and Wale, who I've had on my podcast before, have
Mhm.
done some amazing things, and that to me pushes me as a Black entrepreneur to go into spaces that haven't been done before and do things that you guys have done to bounce back as you guys. And for me personally, I didn't see it as a negative thing. Like as you said, 7 million people are watching the show, so you're automatically going to get that notoriety and get people knowing about your brand. And it gave you time to dot your I's and cross your T's, as you mentioned. Obviously, that wasn't a result that you wanted, but I think it made you guys stronger in the end, because at the end of the day, who really wants to give away that much equity
Sure, yeah, yeah.
um, in order to help your brand grow? You guys did a good enough job, and you have an excellent product that I back with Hustle Clean. It was called Shower Pill then, but called
Yep.
Hustle Clean. And you guys have done amazing things with it. And I watch your journey and I watch your podcast, and it literally motivates me to see two African-American males killing it in an industry that is not seen by people who look like us.
Yo, I
Um,
appreciate it, man. Thank you. That's humbling.
I, I love it. So I have more, but I know we coming down to the wire. So I had
You
two
good?
questions I want to ask, but I'm gonna ask you one of them. So it's kind of a quick hitting question. I'm gonna give you two options, and I want you to pick the one that you feel best represents out of the two. So all that you've been through with your football career, with losing potential scholarships with Notre Dame, UConn, being drafted, cut so many times, then making the Pro Bowl, and then starting a multi-million dollar business from the bottom. Which one would you say are you're most proud of the
Hmm.
two? Your career from living in Florida, going to Texas, and then having the yards and the respect that you should have had coming out of college to get the scholarships, and then going to Cal last minute, getting drafted, cut, Pro Bowl, and or being
Yeah,
a multi-million dollar business, starting something from the ground up.
man. I'm proud of it all for sure. I would say the business side of it because I feel my personal opinion is that it's harder
Yeah.
than what I was doing in the past,
Mm-hmm.
and even though it's like 1% only make it to the NFL, it's
Mm-hmm.
only even over the years of the existence of the National Football League that there's still only so many people that can call themselves alumni of the NFL, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I respect that, but on entrepreneurship is so difficult in the fact that in football, when you get to a certain level, I mean, if you're willing to put in the time and the work, like you can last, right? You can pretty have a really good career once you get to a certain level.
Mm-hmm.
But in entrepreneurship, like you can work extremely hard and see no fruit from it.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be working hard at the right things to bear fruit.
Right.
You got to be smart. So there's a lot of variables too within that place. So I would say the entrepreneur journey, man, as I'm still on it, I'm extremely proud to share with my kids
Mm-hmm.
um, and others that like you can have success outside of sports and running a
Right.
football or playing basketball or what have you. So I'm really proud about that.
That's the answer that I expected. I think um, both are amazing, and the odds are stacked against you. But I think being an African American, doing the things you and Wale are doing, are groundbreaking. Like we've seen black running backs in the NFL. We've seen
Yeah.
uh, people your size play in the league, but we haven't seen people that look like you and Wale in the spaces that you're in and doing the things that you're doing right now. So I think that to me is what I feel like I'm the most proud of witnessing of all the things you've done so far. All right. Last question. Now that we talked about your journey, it's quite evident that you've been unfazed. You didn't quit when adversity came your way. And we know that in order to be successful, you can't quit. You got to just keep pushing. You got to find a way, and things will happen if it's meant to be. With all the NFL players that you played with, who comes to mind as two players you would say have been the most unfazed to you based on what you've been able to witness in their playing career, or just stories that they've told that we wouldn't know about?
Like players that are not known or like widely known?
That known, I would say known because I want the listeners to know, if possible, those names.
Sure. Uh, Pierre Garcon comes to mind as a receiver um, from a Division III school out of Ohio, was an undrafted free agent, and just like, incredible story.
Okay.
Haitian American, just adversity, obstacles stacked along him from South Florida along the way, and made a path for himself, and is doing extremely well. Um, another another guy would be I would say even from the Washington organization again would be Alfred Morris,
Okay.
who was a guy from Florida as well. Undersized back, just like myself. Went to Florida Atlantic University. Um, just a fighter, right? Even if he had success, there was always some reason the critics would come up and why he wasn't a good running back
Running
or a
back.
good player. But he always fought it. He fought it until he had, like, I want to say 10, 11, 12-year career.
Mm-hmm.
So those guys, at least when I think about it, those guys come right to mind that I played with that had amazing stories, and they're doing amazing outside of the game of football too.
Okay. All right. That's kind of my alley oop. I'm gonna try to reach out to them because I want people to know stories like that we probably typically don't get to hear. All right. Didn't get everything that I wanted to get in, but I got enough to prove my point that you have gone through some amazing things to get to where you are. How can people support you? Where can they find you? Including your business. I don't know if you want people to follow you on your personal page and your podcast.
For sure. My personal at J Forsett on all social media platforms. You can follow there, support. Anytime you're supporting the brand, you're supporting me. So at Hustle Clean everywhere. If you can go to Target, pick up some product, order it online, you can from Target or hustleclean.com.
Amazon. On Amazon.
Amazon, yeah, all the distribution channels. Um, and then our podcast, Founders Church, is something I'm really proud of. It's really therapeutic for
Love
me
it.
and Wale as we give back, and interview these entrepreneurs that are really doing some great things within the space, and just giving them their flowers and being able to encourage other entrepreneurs that want to go on this journey that they can have success too, and give them some advice and some actionable tips. So
Love it, man. I know for me, I get excited when y'all drop your podcast every single time. Steve Smith was my favorite so far. Just
oh,
hearing
there
his
we go.
story, didn't know about his struggles academically growing up. But just you could tell with him anyway, he's always been a fighter. Just odds stacked against him too in terms of his height and people not knowing where he comes from. And so I love everything that you guys are doing. With all that
Thank you,
said,
man.
I definitely appreciate your time, man. I know your time is money. You didn't have to do this, but I appreciate you doing this. Without a doubt, your story is inspiring, it's motivating. And with all that said, I wanted to give you your flowers, give you your stamp of approval, and end this podcast by saying, Justin Forsett, you are officially unfazed, my boy.
Man, I appreciate you, man. Love what you're doing and what you're building over there, J Mac. Anytime I can support, I got you.
Appreciate it, man. Thank you.